This video is brought to you by Rosetta Stone. I've been doing a challenge for the last couple years where I've been trying to read a book from every country in the world. I originally did a reading vlog several years ago, I'll link it in the description box if you want to see that, where I started this challenge. And while I made slow progress over the years, reaching 41 countries read by the beginning of 2026, I hadn't made progress quite as rapidly as I'd hoped for. So I decided to start this challenge. And this is the second reading vlog for the official challenge 6. Check out the first reading vlog. I'll have it linked in the description box if you missed it. So you can get the whole rundown of what this challenge is and also hear my reviews of the first 3 books that I read for this challenge in 2026 from the Philippines, Haiti, and Taiwan. But in this video, I'll be continuing on reading from 3 to 4 more countries. If you want to follow along with this challenge in real time, feel free to follow me on Instagram or TikTok. That's where I'm sharing updates every other week as I spin the wheel and select my next read and review the last read. But here on YouTube, I'm compiling several reads together in a more traditional reading vlog for those of you who are not on social media or just like to listen to me ramble on a little bit longer than TikTok and Instagram will allow, because I do love to talk. Just in case you would really rather watch this reading vlog before going back to watch the first reading vlog, I'll give you the fastest rundown of this challenge ever. Every other week I spin a wheel that has all the countries in the world loaded on it. If it lands on a country I've already read from, I'll spin again. Once I land on a country I haven't read from yet, I will either select a book from my shelves if I already own one from that country, ideally meeting both conditions that the author is from the country at hand and that the book that I'm reading is set in that same country as much as I possibly can. And then I read the book, and then I review the book for you, and then we repeat. It's pretty straightforward. But now, without further ado, I am so excited to spin the wheel to find out what country I'm going to read from next. Okay, we're gonna spin the wheel, figure out what country we're gonna read from next. What are we getting? So the country we're reading from next is Guyana in South America, and I didn't have any books listed on my blog post under Guyana, but when I did a little bit of research, I came across so many options, such a rich literary tradition in Guyana, and there's so many amazing books to choose from. But my eye was drawn to one particular book and one particular author. And so I'm going to be getting my hands on Palace of the Peacock by Sir Theodore Wilson Harris, who has been knighted, as the Sir would imply. And Wilson Harris was born in Guyana, lived in Guyana for many, many years before eventually moving to England. And this book is also set in Guyana, so it hits both of our conditions. Also, if I can find this particular edition, I hope I can, it has a foreword written by Jamaica Kincaid, who is an incredible Caribbean author. I read her book Lucy a few years ago and adored it. And I have another one of her books, Annie John, on my physical TBR. I own a copy and I hope to read that soon. So I would love to read her foreword, but I'm very excited to try Palace of the Peacock. So let me just read the blurb for you. I'll read the description. A crew of men are embarking on a voyage up a turbulent river through the rainforests of Guyana. Their domineering leader, Dawn, is the spirit of a conquistador, obsessed with hunting for a mysterious woman and exploiting indigenous people as plantation labor. But their expedition is plagued by tragedies, haunted by drowned ghosts, specters of the crew themselves inhabiting a blurred shadowland between life and death. As their journey into the interior, their own hearts of darkness deepens. It assumes a spiritual dimension, guiding them towards a new destination, the Palace of the Peacock. A modernist fever dream, prose poem, modern myth, elegy to victims of colonial conquest, Wilson Harris's masterpiece has defied definition for over 60 years, and it sounds right up my alley. Can't wait to read it. So I'm gonna go find myself a copy and get started on it, and I'll be back when I get to the halfway point to let you know how it's going. I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about this video's partner, Rosetta Stone. As you know, I've been using this Reading Around the World challenge not only as a way for me to diversify my reading and enjoy literature from around the globe, but also as a practical way to practice my French. I was in French immersion from first grade through high school, and I've always loved the language. But as an adult living in an area of Canada without much of a francophone population, I don't get nearly as much practice as I'd like. Not only do I value being able to speak both official languages of my country and being able to appreciate the rich history of literature, film, and music created in French in its original form from all over the world, like the book I read in French from Haiti in the last Reading Around the World vlog, or the book I'm reading in this vlog from Mauritius. But I also have Francophone family from Quebec and a new little nephew who is growing up bilingual. I don't want to lose my ability to speak, read, and understand the language, and that's why I'm reinforcing all of this practicing I'm doing with the amazing lessons from Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is an all-in-one language learning program designed to help you feel comfortable actually using your target language in the real world. One thing I especially appreciate is that their approach feels very intuitive. Instead of relying on long vocabulary lists and memorization, Rosetta Stone uses immersion and context to help your brain naturally make connections. Much more like the way we learn language organically. I also love that I can learn at my own pace and get so much practice speaking. Another feature I've really been loving is their true accent speech recognition technology, which gives you instant feedback on your pronunciation while you practice speaking alongside a native speaker, which is really valuable for training your ear, especially with all of those difficult French sounds that get a lot harder when you're out of practice. Whether you're brushing up on a language like me or picking up a brand new one from scratch, Rosetta Stone is a really approachable and effective way to build confidence and consistency in your learning. You can get an exclusive discount on a 12-month Rosetta Stone subscription by clicking the link in my description or scanning the QR code on screen. Get access to all 25 languages and stay consistent with it, and in a year you will be amazed by how much progress you can make. Thank you again to Rosetta Stone for partnering with me on this video. Hello friends, I'm back. I finished Palace of the Peacock by Wilson Harris. I know I normally do a halfway update, but this was actually quite a short book. So I have the full Guyana quartet here, but the first book only went to page, in my ebook version, and I make my margins pretty big because I like to write lots of notes. It was, 171 pages. So not particularly long. And I actually found that once I started getting into the book itself, when I really got into the flow, and let me tell you, there's a flow, I could not put it down. And I also could not fathom talking about it halfway through because I had no idea what was happening. To be totally honest, I'm still not sure I know what happened, but I did have a good time. So what I did was read this book with very little context. I did read Jamaica Kincaid's foreword because I love Jamaica Kincaid, and that was part of what made me excited to read this book, and her foreword was great. But I skipped the full intro because I was worried it might have some spoilers, and then I just dove in. And wow, what an experience that was. I have since watched several videos talking about Wilson Harris as an author and Palace of the Peacock, and I've also read the foreword and note on the quartet from the author. And there was something right in the first paragraph of the foreword that is very apt and very much describes what's to come. They are works of compressed turbulence and beauty. Compressed turbulence and beauty is a great way to put it. And the writing style is dense, hence compressed, and chaotic, I guess, hence turbulence, and absolutely gorgeous, hence the beauty. It's just so scrumptious, the language itself, the words, and some of the videos I was watching talking about Wilson Harris's style talked about how his writing is very much like going with the flow of a river, and you just have to keep going. You can't get too stuck in the weeds of trying to figure out exactly what he's saying in every sentence, because there's just so much there. There are so many metaphors. There's so much sort of conflicting and not even conflicting so much. I mean, Jamaica Kincaid said something similar in her introduction about how it is a but also an and they both exist at once. And his writing is very much that. Everything is everything all at once. And there are lots of contradictions and comparisons, but also just layers and layers of imagery and metaphor, and very non-linear and non-literal, which can be confusing at times. But I very quickly realized as I started to read it that I just had to let go of totally 100% knowing exactly what he was saying and what he meant and every layer of every metaphor and little bit of imagery in every sentence. I just had to go with the flow and let it wash over me. And the more I did that, the more I got out of the imagery, the more I followed the story, the more I understood what Harris was trying to get at, and the more I appreciated it in general. Because the beginning was frustrating. I'm not going to lie. I was very frustrated at the start. I felt like I was too dumb to understand it. But when I let go a little bit of control and needing to know everything all the time, I had a much better time. And in watching some videos about Wilson Harris, I understood so much more why he was writing this way and why his style developed in this way as a post-colonial rebellion against Western literature and linear storytelling and this sense of the pretension of absolute truth, the framing of colonization especially, but literature from the colonizing force having this pretension of this is the truth, the way we tell the story is the only truth, and any other version of the story is not accurate. And as a rebellion against that, to push back against that in this experimental post-colonial form, Wilson Harris was all about telling stories where there is no one absolute truth and where there are multiple layered realities and where things aren't so simple and linear. There is much more complexity and more of an organic, natural, nature adjacent sort of quality, which also really lends itself to that rushing river and waterfall feeling to the writing. It's very propulsive. And I just really appreciated it once I let go of my expectations. And again, that like need for control and to understand every little thing. And I really enjoyed it. It is a fever dream. It's a fever dream, but in a good way. I like weird books. I like hazy, dreamlike sorts of books, and that's what this is. It's gorgeously written. It has so much vivid imagery. It really describes the setting in a really beautiful way, acknowledging the fact that often you have no idea if what's being described is actually happening or not. But I just found it really engaging. I found the characters really vivid and endearing, and I was surprised by how quickly I got attached to them. And I just found it to be a really beautiful commentary on the colonizing mindset, this mindset of control and of trying to force native peoples and a native land into your ordered rows as the colonizer. And it also shows in the character of Don, who is Guyanese, but has this colonizer mindset, that his inability to recognize his own flaws and his inability to allow himself to be in communion with the native people and with the land, his need or attempt to assert control over it is his ultimate downfall. And that really is the message of the story as it descends into more, wild off-the-wall scenarios and strangeness. There is a very clear message at the heart of it, and it is very anti-colonial. And I just thought it was gorgeous. I feel like my brain is broken a little bit, but in a very good way. And I feel like that is exactly why I wanted to start this challenge. That's why I wanted to read a book from every country in the world. I wanted to experience different traditions of storytelling, different types of literature, and books that are so authentically from a certain time and place, that are telling a story from a very particular perspective. And I feel like that's what this is. I'm going to get emotional. I feel myself getting like choked up. I just think this was beautiful. And I'm not sure I ever would have read Wilson Harris if I wasn't doing this challenge. So I'm feeling very grateful right now, even as, again, I kind of feel like my brain broke. It's very dense. It's very complex. It's kind of challenging to read, but I think it's a great challenge in a good way. And I do think, again, that it's a great lesson in letting go of control, which is also, tied very well into the message of the novel in terms of that colonial controlling sort of mindset that is at odds with the natural world and with native peoples and native ways of life, and that causes the strife and animosity instead of a togetherness, a working together for a better future. I've read my fair share of experimental fiction and, dreamlike, hazy, fever dream sort of books and magical realism. I have read books from over 40 countries already, so I have been trying different things and pushing the envelope for myself, but even still, I found this very challenging to my literary expectations. And I think it was a really good thing for me. And I feel a bit galvanized and excited, not only to read the rest of the quartet, because I would love to do that. Each novel in the quartet is just a little over 100 pages, so they're quite short, but I did find it took quite a bit of very focused reading time to get through it. So I might have to break it up or take a longer time to get through the quartet, but I'm excited to do so. It just makes me excited to keep going on this challenge and to keep, pushing boundaries for myself and expanding my horizons and developing my point of view and my perspective and my appreciation for all the different flavors of literature and all the different literary traditions that exist in the world. So I'm not really going to say much, to be honest, about what happens in this book because I don't want to spoil it. There's not a huge amount of plot necessarily, but I don't want to spoil it for you. I think this is an experience, and I think you should go in as unaware as humanly possible to get the full experience. Also, kind of don't want to do a spoiler section on this one, to be totally honest, because I feel like I'm not an expert in what I just read. I don't know that I have any super deep insights that are going to enrich your reading experience if you've read this. I'm sure there are people who know way more what they're talking about and have more understanding of the history and context to give you that. I will share the channel and some of the videos I was watching talking about Wilson Harris and this book because they were extremely helpful to me. And if I come across any other videos or articles that I find useful, I will link those in the description box as well. I just feel like because I know so many people watch the spoiler section, even if they haven't read the book and are considering maybe reading it, I kind of don't want to talk spoilers at all because I really feel like this should be experienced with a fresh, open mind. And I don't want to impose my interpretations of some of the strange, very heavily symbolic things that happen on you if you haven't read it yet. I also feel like my interpretations are probably pretty obvious to most readers and probably most other people would have a similar interpretation. There is a lot of gendered and gender roles based imagery, a lot of feminine versus masculine. There's a lot of religious imagery and language, which makes sense because religion is so often a tool that colonizers will use. And, nature and the chaos of nature and the strength, the power of nature versus this, the attempt to control it by force of human beings. And again, especially a sort of colonizer mindset. Is this silly? I just want people to read this. It's very short. I think you should pick it up. And I don't want to spoil your own experience of trying to wade your way through this, rushing torrent of a river of language and ideas and imagery and themes. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I feel like that was a weird review, but this was kind of a weird book. A very good book, though. I am going to give Palace of the Peacock 5 stars. That was such a cool experience. I would love to know your thoughts if you've read it. Let me know down below. If you have read the book and you want to share your spoiler thoughts and interpretations and so on in the comments, just say spoilers for Palace of the Peacock at the top, hit enter a few times so that you don't spoil it for other people and share your thoughts. And I would love to chat spoilers with you in the comments. Hopefully more hidden away from those who have not picked it up, but that was so much fun. I'm very glad that I let go and didn't let myself just continue to be frustrated because it was a little rough at the start, but I had a great time. So that was Palace of the Peacock. I'm going to spin the wheel and find out what country I'm going to read from next. I feel like I'm having such a good time with this challenge so far. I'm so glad I decided to bring it back in a more formal way and really focus on it this year because it's bringing so many interesting and amazing books into my life. And thanks for following along with me. Thanks for letting me get nerdy about sometimes pretty obscure books on my channel and not just always reading, the popular books that everyone's talking about, because I often feel like it's the books that aren't getting the most attention online that are really the most impactful to me as a human being and really change me, So anyway, getting all philosophical there, I'm going to grab my iPad so we can spin the wheel and know what country we're going to read from next. So I just pulled up my Reading Around the World tracker in Notion so that I could check off Guyana, and I thought I'd update you that I've now read from 44 of 199 countries, which brings me to 22.11% complete. I still have a long way to go, but not too bad. Okay, and let's go. I think I have to press right in the middle on this one, which makes it hard to do when I'm not looking, but I think I got it. Okay, let's see. I wonder what continent we'll be in next. What does it say? So we've landed on Mauritius, which is an island country located about 1,100 nautical miles off the southeastern coast of East Africa, and it's east of Madagascar. I do have books from Mauritius. Oh my gosh, I'm so pleasantly surprised. Okay, they're both by the same author, Ananda Devi, but there is Eve Out of Her Ruins, Ève de ses décombres, and Saint-Hiver, which are both in French. Ooh, I wonder which one I should read. And I have decided to read Ève de ses décombres by Ananda Devi. And in English, it is Eve Out of Her Ruins. There is an English translation, but it was originally written in French because Ananda Devi is a Francophone author. So I'm going to be reading it in French primarily. I will also get the English ebook to refer to, just in case I ever get lost. It is an added level of difficulty for me to read in French just in general, but especially when I'm reading in French, written by someone who speaks French from a different country. As far as I could tell, the other book that was recommended to me, which was Saint-Hiver, it doesn't look like it has an English translation in my initial research. So in reading this book, that allows any of you watching who speak English, presumably if you watch my videos, you speak English, you can also read this book in its English translation if you're interested. Let me read a bit of the blurb to you so that you know what this book is about. Eve Out of Her Ruins is a heartbreaking look at the dark corners of the island nation of Mauritius that tourists never see, and a poignant exploration of the construction of personhood at the margins of society. It was awarded the prestigious Prix des Cinq Continents upon publication as the best book written in French outside of France. Eve Out of Her Ruins is a harrowing account of the violent reality of life in her native country by the figurehead of Mauritian literature. So it talks about how it is written with brutal honesty and poetic urgency, and it's the tale of 4 young Mauritians trapped in their country's endless cycle of fear and violence. And it looks like each of these 4 young people have their own different circumstances and are going through their own things, maybe a bit of a coming of age. Devi writes about terrible and bitter events with a soft, delicate voice. So I'm excited to read this one. I'm going to get it on my Kobo, hopefully, the ebook versions, if I can't get either the English or French on my Kobo from my library or through one of the many ebook vendors that exist. I will buy a physical copy, but try to avoid doing that because I already own so many books. It seems like it might be a little bit emotionally heavy based on the subject matter, but it also sounds like it's very good. So I'm excited to read it. Hopefully you are too. I'm going to go off and get started, and I'll hopefully come back when I get to the halfway point, but I'll definitely be back by the time I finish it, and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, I am checking in here just to say that I thought when I did my research that I was going to be able to get a copy of this ebook, but then when I looked after I was done filming, I could not manage to get the ebook anywhere. Every site that had it listed as an ebook wouldn't actually let me buy it, and I was getting really frustrated. I could get the English ebook, but not the French ebook. So eventually I gave in and ordered the physical copy from Renaud Bré, and it was supposed to come in 4 to 5 business days, which would have been a little bit of a tight turnaround, but it has not arrived still. Canadian shipping is slow. We are a large country, so I guess it's understandable. I assume that the book is coming from one of the warehouses in Quebec, so it has a long way to go. Still, am I a little miffed? Yes, but it's fine. What I have decided to do, I did wait probably way too long hoping it would come, and it has not. But what I thought I would do instead is spin the wheel again and figure out what country I'll do next, and possibly start on the next book, maybe even finish the next book first. And then whenever this book shows up, I can read it and I'll slot it in there. So that's what we're going to do. Quick little update for you. I will spin the wheel again and pick my next country. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that this would happen sometimes, especially there are some countries that just have their books are not nearly as widely distributed. They're not available in as many places. So it does happen. And sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. So let's spin the wheel again and we'll see what I'm going to read. No one could touch us if they tried. Oh, that has a state of mind. Okay, so let's spin the wheel and see if we can find a country that I can read from while we wait for the other book to arrive. Ideally something that I can find as an ebook would be great. Equatorial Guinea. I don't know if I have any suggestions for this on my blog post, but let's look. Go to E. Ooh, okay, I have 2 options. Equatorial Guinea, By Night the Mountain Burns, and La Bastarda. So I think I might read this one because it's actually available. By Night the Mountain Burns. And the synopsis is, By Night the Mountain Burns recounts the narrator's childhood on a remote island off the West African coast, living with his mysterious grandfather, several mothers, and no fathers. We learn of a dark chapter in the island's history. A bushfire destroys the crops, then hundreds perish in a cholera outbreak. Superstition dominates, and the islanders must sacrifice their possessions to the enraged ocean god. What of their lives will they manage to save? By Night the Mountain Burns is available from Kobo, so I can get it on my e-reader, which is very exciting. So I am going to read this one next, and whenever the other book arrives, I will get started on it and I'll slot it in after this one. Hopefully it won't take too long, but I didn't want to just keep waiting for however long that was going to take and get even more behind. So at least this way I can get started on By Night the Mountain Burns by Juan Tomás Avila Laurel, and we can keep making progress on this challenge. That's all. I'll see you soon. Okay, I'm halfway through By Night the Mountain Burns, and this is going to be possibly my shortest update ever because this is very stream of consciousness. There are no chapter breaks. It's all just one story, and it's very much told in a stream of consciousness kind of oral storytelling style. There's a lot of callbacks and repetitions, and I just kind of feel like I can't review it yet. I have to see where it goes. I have to see how it ends. I have to see how it all ties up together. So far, it is a bit of a hard read because they're going through a lot on this island. They have had a plague. Cholera came to the island and killed a bunch of people. They have had a really destructive fire that has undone years and years of work and farming. And they've also had this really vicious murder in the street of a woman. And so just a lot is happening, but I can't really draw any conclusions yet. I just have to see where it goes. So shortest update ever, maybe so, but I'm going to go finish By Night the Mountain Burns, and I'll be back when I'm done to let you know what I think. So I finished By Night the Mountain Burns by Juan Tomás Avila Laurel for Equatorial Guinea. And I know I say this a lot, but this time I really mean it. This is probably going to be a pretty short review because this wasn't super long in general, but it also doesn't really feel like a novel. And while I found it interesting, and I definitely felt like I learned a lot about this specific remote island off the coast of Equatorial Guinea, and I found it interesting, it definitely reads like the transcription of an interview with someone who grew up on an isolated island and is sharing their experiences, remembering their childhood, telling stories. It's very much stream of consciousness, remembering things, going back to share another detail, repeating things, repeating wording, which is very natural. It feels very much like how someone would tell you a story, unscripted off the top of their head, but there's not necessarily a consistent through line thematically or, a traditional story structure, a beginning, middle, and end. There's no real arc for the characters. It was engaging. I read it pretty quickly. It also didn't really feel like a novel. And I think that was intentional. And in that way, it was effective. I guess I just kind of wanted a little bit more out of it in terms of there being some sort of a plot or there being themes that were consistently being explored throughout or some sort of growth or change for the characters. And I didn't necessarily feel that. There's nothing wrong with this particular style. It just wasn't quite what I expected going into it. I do think it was worth reading, although part of me wishes that I had picked a book that was set on the mainland because I hadn't quite fully registered how isolated this island was and how separate it was from the rest of the country. And so maybe not the best representation of Equatorial Guinea in general as a country. Not to say that any of the books I'm reading for this challenge could be said to represent an entire country, because there are so many varied experiences within any given country, no matter how small. And so no one book is ever going to represent everyone or the entire experience of a country or every facet of it, of course. But in this case, it's just a little bit more obvious that perhaps this is an edge case because this is such a tiny community and so removed from the rest of the country. But I did think it was interesting. It was a quick read. It was an easy read. There's definitely a lot here that communicates the rhythms of life on this island and gender roles and expectations and communal experiences, interactions between religious beliefs and superstitions and differences in how people are viewed based on gender and very traditional sort of set roles based on gender, and interactions with people from other countries who come to fish in the area around their island. I would say that the stream of consciousness style does make it more immersive in a way, but I also found it a little bit not necessarily hard to follow, but I did sometimes find myself starting to check out, especially when the narrator would start to repeat himself and come back to the same idea and talk about it again, which is a very normal way for people to talk. But in a book, I'm not necessarily as used to that kind of repetition, and I would sometimes find myself thinking, okay, well, I already heard that. And I could definitely feel that I had to rein in my ADHD brain that was ready to just run off and think about other things as soon as he started to repeat himself. It's a genuinely fascinating glimpse into an experience that very few people have living on this tiny island off the coast of Equatorial Guinea, and I think it was worth the read, even if it wasn't quite what I expected and didn't necessarily deliver on some of the things that I typically yearn for with a novel. So I think I am landing at 3 stars for By Night the Mountain Burns. But now I'm moving on to the final book that I'm picking up for this particular reading vlog for the country Mauritius, which is also a little island off the coast of Africa, but in this case on the other side of the country, on the east side of the country in the Indian Ocean. And that was Ève de ses décombres by Ananda Devi. And I am reading it in French. I do have the English ebook on my Kobo, so chapters are quite short and they're switching between points of view. So they're very natural pause points. So when I finish a chapter, I'm often just glancing at the English version, just skimming it quickly to make sure that I didn't miss anything important. So I'm actually only a few chapters away from the halfway point. So I'll cut away to me reading those few chapters, but then I'll be right back here maybe in 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes maybe actually, to let you know what I think of this so far and how it's going. So let's cut to me reading. Okay, so it has been about 15, 20 minutes, something like that, and I finished the first part, which was just shy of 50%, but I felt like it was a good place to end it for this halfway update. So Ève de ses décombres, which is Eve out of her ruins in English. Wow. Okay. So like I said, this is told in short chapters and constantly switching points of view. So we have Eve, who was our protagonist, and then we have Sad, who is a boy in town, the same age as Eve, and they're 17 in the present day in the novel, and he's in love with her. And then we have Clélio, who is another boy around their age, who is part of the same sort of gang of boys with Sad. And then we have Savita, who is also around the same age, and she and Eve are in a relationship with each other. So we're going between these 4 points of view, and the chapters are quite short. Typically, they're about a page, 2 pages. I think the longest chapter has maybe been 4 or 5 pages long, if that. So very short, which normally is something that I hate, to be totally honest. I normally really dislike how choppy it feels to read super short chapters, but I do think that something about this is really working for me. There's something it very much feels like a series of vignettes and these quick shots, these quick cuts to different little moments and just insights into their mind and what each character is thinking. And maybe because the pace is so fast, it just sort of guides you along at a quick clip. I don't know why it's working for me. It normally doesn't, but I'm liking it. I also love how at the end of many of these short chapters, there are sort of little separate poems. And so far, I'm not sure necessarily what the perspective is or where they're coming from, but many of them are quite beautiful. But they're in a different tense and the font is different, so they feel quite separate. And they're not at the end of every single chapter, but they do come up pretty frequently. And the writing style is pretty straightforward generally, but there are some really gorgeous lyrical moments that I'm really in love with. I was going to read some quotes, but I think I'll wait till I get to the end because then I can just pick my favorites and I'll just read a few for you. But I'm really enjoying this. It is a hard read. Eve, like I said, is 17, but it talks about how from a young age, I think from basically the age of 12, she starts trading with boys her age for things like pencils and erasers and rulers and giving sexual favors in return. So that has been pretty hard to read. And my perspective reading this, Eve does not seem to be into men or boys at all. She reads like a lesbian to me entirely. Her relationship with Savita is on such a different level. The way she talks about touching Savita, kissing Savita, just how tender she is with her. It's just a completely different level. And she multiple times has sort of talked about how she would never say I love you to a boy. But then we have that added layer of her reading, at least to me, like a lesbian who is only sleeping with boys and men because she is living in poverty and it's the only thing she has to barter with, or that's what she believed at 12 when a boy first asked her for something in return for a gift of a pencil or an eraser or a ruler. She felt that all she had to give was her body. And there are quite a few passages that I'm finding pretty hard to read, but they are very beautifully written. I, so far, am very invested in Eve and Savita, less invested in Sad and Clelio. Clelio is probably the least prominent so far. I don't know if he actually has the least amount of page time. Probably Savita has the least amount of actual point of view chapters, but I just don't find his point of view quite as interesting so far, and he feels less connected to the other three. Sad is creeping me out. He is obsessed with Eve to an unhealthy degree, and some of his thoughts about how he's going to fix her and put her back together with the power of his love and magical organ is just really giving me the ick on a major level, and I'm kind of afraid that he's going to escalate because there's definitely a repeated theme of the idea of men believing that they already possess anything that they look at and covet, and if you say no or ignore them, they feel like you're taking something away from them because they've already decided that they are going to possess you, and that definitely feels like it's playing out with Sad, and I'm very afraid that something bad is going to happen to Eve or Savita or both because of his obsession. So I guess we'll find out what happens. I definitely feel a lot of stress and tension reading this, but I do think it's very beautifully written. It doesn't necessarily have the strongest sense of place ever. I would love a little bit more description of their environment and the world outside of, the country outside of these 4 teenagers, but it also feels like it's intentionally very intimate into their perspectives and into how they're viewing the world and what they value and what they're focused on as teenagers. And teenagers are not always the most tapped in to everything happening in their country as a whole. That's where they're at developmentally, and they're focused on their friends and their crushes and school and their life and their fears for the future and their family life and home life, and it makes sense. So I'm enjoying it. I'm probably going to keep it short because I actually just really want to dive back in and keep reading. I am afraid, though. I feel a lot of stress about the ways that this might go wrong. Even just in the last Sad chapter, he had to try to distract his gang of boys away from teaching the girls a lesson for being too focused on each other and ignoring the boys. And while I am definitely getting bad vibes from Sad himself because of the obsessive way that he talks about Eve, and that sort of possessive quality in the way that he discusses her, even if he doesn't end up escalating to violence, I'm afraid that the group of boys, his gang, is going to. And Savita is also getting anxious. In the very last chapter I read, she's thinking about how she and Eve have to leave before the boys turn on them, and she can feel their attention and she can feel their energy shifting. And so I'm just stressed out about it right now. But it's very immersive. It's very engaging. I'm reading it so quickly, even though it's definitely a challenge to read in French. So I'm going to go finish it and let you know what I think when I get to the end. It's a pretty short book. It's only 155 pages. So I'm definitely reading it more slowly than I read in English because that's just how it goes for me anyway, reading in my second language. I read a lot slower in French than in English, but it's still not that long. So I assume I'll be back later tonight to let you know what I think. And I'm scared that I'm going to be destroyed. So Wish me luck. I'm afraid. So I just finished Eve de ces décombres. Honestly, I'm speechless. I basically read this in 2 sittings, and it probably would have been a single sitting if I hadn't started it while I was still finishing another book for this challenge and having to pause to finish that one and review it. This was so good. Also dark and devastating, like absolutely heartbreaking. I'm not okay, but it was so good. It was so beautifully written. It was so evocative. It was so immersive. The characters just jumped off the page. Even the characters who I didn't like as much were incredibly vivid. The one character that I mentioned in the halfway point, the one point of view character that I wasn't quite fully on board with, or I just found his chapters a little less engaging, he became much more interesting to me, much more complex in the second half. And I understand why Clélio was a point of view character based on where Davy took the character in the second half, but damn. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to spoil anything. I would highly recommend this. I reread sections of this in the English translation and they were very well translated. So even if you don't speak French, I would recommend checking this out. My heart hurts actually right now. Like I just feel a little dazed. And honestly, when I first finished it, I was kind of upset with the ending. Not even actually, I loved the ending. I was upset with the last 3 sentences. But the more I thought about it over the last 10 minutes as I turned my lights on and my camera on and my microphone on, I started to interpret the ending a little differently, and I actually kind of love it, even though it's absolutely heartbreaking. Damn it. I wasn't prepared for this. I can't believe how quickly I read this. I just kind of feel like Davy grabbed me and yanked me into the book and then didn't let me go until the last page. It was so propulsive and intense, and there is that building tension where you feel like something bad is going to happen, and it keeps you reading almost like a thriller, except it's not a thriller at all. It's very literary, it's beautifully written, it's emotional and raw, and has so much to say about existing in the world as a woman, specifically living as a young woman in Mauritius, the realities of living through poverty, discrimination in various forms, and cycles of abuse and self-harm in a variety of ways. And it just was gorgeous. And it also felt like they were sort of echoes of a commentary on the lingering effects of colonization on the island of Mauritius as well. I might cry. I'm trying not to. I cry so much on camera, and sometimes I feel like I need to rein it in. This was gorgeous. I'm going to be thinking about this forever, possibly. I'm definitely going to be rereading this, ideally really taking my time, because like I said, I read this in basically 2 sittings. It's quite short, but still, I absolutely inhaled this. I will do a brief spoiler section for this because I want to talk a bit about the things that happen in the second half that are quite spoilery plot-wise, and then also the ending and how my interpretation has kind of shifted on it. But wow, I would highly recommend this. I thought this was gorgeous. Devastating, absolutely devastating. Please look at the content warnings on the book card when it pops up. I use my little ding sound effect when it pops up on the screen. That'll be after the spoiler section, especially around Eve's experiences with sex as an underage girl, as a teenage girl. And I'm going to do a spoiler section. I'm afraid if I talk anymore, I'm going to inadvertently spoil things. I would just know that I highly recommend this. Holy shit, incredible. Wow. Actually, let me read just a couple quotes before I do a spoiler section. Some of these might be spoilery, in which case I will edit them into the spoiler section, but chaque chose que j'apprends laisse une blessure sur mon corps. Le savoir est douloureux et chèrement acquis. Les mains des hommes prennent possession de vous avant même de vous avoir touché. Dès que leurs pensées se dirigent vers vous, ils vous ont déjà possédé. Dire non est une insulte, puisque vous leur en voulez ceux qui l'ont déjà pris. La poésie des femmes, c'est le rire dans ce coin perdu qui ouvre un bout de paradis pour ne pas nous laisser nous noyer. I mean, this was published 20 years ago. And it feels like the origin, like the blueprint for female rage and for examining the ways that young women and girls, heavy emphasis on girls, are sexualized and objectified and forced to commodify themselves and objectify themselves before they even reach adulthood because of the absolute shit world we live in and the misogyny and rape culture. And there are so many extra layers because Eve is, to my mind, how I interpreted it, a lesbian. And she is trying to exist and navigate her way through this world that is so man-oriented while actually not giving any shits about men at all, but having to because she has no choice. And it's actually, the book makes very clear that when she becomes less interested in men and focuses more on finding her own joy with Savita, that is when the situation becomes very dangerous and precarious for them both, because in that quote I read, men, look at a woman or a girl and they decide that they possess her already, and saying no is taking something away from them because they feel they already own you. It's not even just the pain of rejection, of wanting something and having someone say no, not getting it in the first place. It's feeling that you already have it or have a right to have it and then having it taken away, and how much more that stings. The entitlement that comes with the patriarchy. I could go on, but I just think it was so gorgeously depicted here and harrowingly depicted and absolutely enraging and devastating in the most accurate way possible. I'm going to lose it. I need to stop because, again, I'm going to spoil something, but damn. Okay, I'm going to do a spoiler section. Okay, this is spoilers for Ève de Sédécambre. Don't watch this if you haven't read this book, because you should go read it. It exists in translation. If you're watching this video, you probably speak English and read in English, so you can read the translation. I'm watching you. Go read the book. Don't just watch the spoilers. Okay, so basically, what to even say? I had such a bad feeling at the end of part 1, and I was right to feel that. The beginning of part 2 starts with a bang, and immediately we know that a girl's body has been found in the garbage, which is so disgusting. Sorry, pardon my language, which is so disgusting. And you don't know for about a page and a half. You have a strong sense that it's either Eve or Savita, but you don't know for about a page and a half which one it is. And it turns out it's Savita. And we follow Eve descending into despair and grief. And we follow the boys somehow becoming even more angry and blaming Eve for everything, for the fact that they're now under police scrutiny because a girl was found dead. And of course, that's Eve's fault and not their own fault for being a gang and even talking about needing to teach the girls a lesson prior to this happening. So now there's danger to Eve, and Sad is trying to figure out how he can save her, basically, from his gang, because they're getting increasingly angry and upset. And Eve's parents are upset at her because they know that she knew Savita and spent time with her, and they blame her for, again, all this scrutiny that's fallen on their family. So her father beats her to within an inch of her life, and she goes to the morgue and tries to see Savita's body, and they won't let her in initially, but eventually she is able to see her. And that scene was absolutely devastating to read. And the cop who let her in sort of tried to talk to her a bit and tried to encourage her to get out of this life that she's building for herself and find a way out, and actually gave her a gun and just tried to impart on her to protect herself and that she didn't have to continue to give her body in this way. And she realizes, and we also realize through these sort of poetry sections that turn out to be from this disgusting teacher's perspective who was sleeping with his underage student, Eve, that he spotted Savita looking through the gap in the door, seeing them because she was waiting for Eve, and Eve was taking so long that she went to see if they were done. And he felt this wave of shame from being witnessed because he didn't feel enough shame. He didn't feel enough shame to not do it in the first place. He only felt shame when he realized someone witnessed him doing the disgusting thing. So then he decides that she can't be allowed to live. So he just murders her. He doesn't even feel particularly angry. He just kills her on the way home. She walks Eve home, and then she's alone for a couple blocks, and he's been following them, and he just kills her and throws her in the trash. So I'm trying not to go on a long rant, but absolutely disgusting. And then he starts having a pity party about how, like, oh, his life is ruined, and oh, it sucks to be him, and he's just gonna say goodbye to the world, but he hopes he gets to hold Eve one more time. Like, you don't deserve that. Please just go away. Like, just die in a hole somewhere. What is wrong with you? And Eve has figured out that it's him, and she goes to his apartment that she's been to at least once to get school books, and she kills him with the gun that the police officer gave her. And good. I'm glad. And she doesn't let him hug her one more time. Good. I'm glad. And then Sad is trying to find her because he knows that his gang is out to get her because they saw her with this cop and think that she's colluding, basically, and gonna rat them all out. So they're looking for her. Sad finds her, and she's standing there with a gun in her hand, and she tells him what happened, and he's trying to convince her that he should go to the cops and turn himself in, and that she can run away. And she doesn't want him to do that because he didn't kill anyone, so he shouldn't turn himself in for her. And at first I kind of hated those last couple sentences because at the very end, he's talking about how he would do anything for her, with her. Mais j'ai au moins une certitude pour elle, avec elle, pour une saison ou plusieurs. Je suis prêt à aller en enfer. Tout le reste m'indiffère. Je passe la main sur sa nuque, sur sa tête rase, même sous le muret, l'eau nu, mais elle a un bon goût sur mes lèvres. And it's raining on them, and then, he tastes the rain on her lips. And my first reaction to that ending was, no, what? No. Because even if Sad didn't end up using his obsession as a reason to hurt someone, and he actually ended up trying to help Eve, despite that, he was also very creepy about her and very persistent regardless of her not having any interest. And she also is depicted through the entire book, despite the fact that she has sexual encounters with boys and men. She's very much written, in my opinion, to be a lesbian. There is zero indication through this whole book that she actually likes Sad in that way. Like, they are friends. And that's it. And at first I was very upset that she kissed him at the end, as if it was sort of setting it up as like, well, he was always loyal to her and he loved her the whole time, and now she understands and they'll be together. Like, no, she just lost her love, Savita. She's not over it yet. Stop. But then I thought about it more, and I could be wrong. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts if you've read this, because that first reading, my first impression after reading it was a bit of rage, and I was upset because I thought the book was so well done and that ending pissed me off. But then I thought about it more, and it felt to me like she continues to know that her greatest bargaining chip is her body, is her desirability, and she knows that Sad loves her and desires her, or at least desires her, right? And whether she actually wants him to turn himself in for her or just to help her escape, whatever it is, she knows that the best way to ensure his loyalty to her is to throw a dog a bone. And she's done much more. She's given much more of herself for less than someone protecting her who knows that she just murdered someone. So I feel that it was her using that part of herself at least one more time to ensure her freedom and safety, and that it doesn't indicate that they're supposed to have like a happily ever after everything. But I would be curious to hear your thoughts if you've read it, because again, my first reaction was, what? No, stop. What in the compulsory heterosexuality is this? But then, I don't know, I think it makes sense thematically, and I think it makes sense for Eve as a character. She is still just 17, and she is distraught. She just lost her love. She's grieving, and also she just killed the murderer of her love who murdered her because of Eve, and she's feeling all that guilt. And she's in danger and has to escape. So I just feel like that second interpretation, it makes sense. It sort of came to me naturally as I kept thinking about it, and I also like it better personally. Also, I should have noted that the other male character, Clelio, who had point of view chapters throughout, he's part of the gang, and he has a past of, he has a record for minor infractions, and he gets picked up, and they want to put it on him because he already has been arrested before. He's the easy person to pin it on. And so we, in the second half, learn a little bit more about him, and he spends some time in jail. And it also seems like he has a vision of his brother at the end, that his brother possibly is actually dead, like he thought he was, which I have questions about that because he says that he's talking to his brother on the phone earlier. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to have to look up reviews or read analyses of this book to figure out how people interpret that, or let me know if you've read this, how you interpreted Clélio and his brother and that sort of tiny subplot. But he's in jail, and it seems that because the teacher who murdered Savita was planning on taking his own life after seeing Eve one more time, he had written a note confessing to what he did. So the hope is that he'll be found and that Clélio will be set free because he didn't hurt anyone. So I thought that again, in the first half, I wasn't quite sure why he was getting his own point of view chapters, and I wasn't really as invested in his chapters, although I did feel that many of his chapters actually gave us more information about Mauritius on a larger scale, which I appreciated just for context. But as a character himself, I wasn't quite as invested, but in the second half, I felt I understood him more. And I'm just heartbroken for Savita. She had the fewest chapters. She's only in the first half, but also she just didn't have as many chapters as the others. She didn't show up until about the third of the way through in her own point of view chapters, and I thought she was lovely and compassionate and seemed like a beautiful human being with a beautiful heart, and her relationship with Eve was really lovely, and I just find it absolutely devastating and absolutely rage-inducing that she lost her life so pointlessly because a disgusting, predatory man got embarrassed, was ashamed of himself, and couldn't sit with it. I could go on, but I shan't. Beautiful, gorgeous, devastating, heartbreaking, so beautifully written. I'm very angry, but I also thought it was gorgeous. And I want to hear your thoughts. If you've read this, please tell me your thoughts in the comments. That's it for spoilers. I believe this won an award when it was published in 2006. I'll have to look that up again to confirm, but understandable, well-deserved, if that is true. And I need to read more Ananda Devi. I believe she's written many, many books. So I'm going to have to start adding them to my TBR because wow. In case you couldn't tell, this is a 5-star read. 5 stars for F. de Décombres. I need a good couple business days to process. Please read this book. Wow. Wow. Okay. So I guess I need to spin the wheel to figure out what country I'm going to read from next. I'm going to do that at the start of the next video, like in the intro of the next reading vlog. So I'm just going to go because I feel like I have no more coherent thoughts in my head right now. So yeah, that's me. Those are my thoughts. Thanks for being here. I appreciate you. Leave an emoji that makes you think of one of the books I read in this video in the comments if you made it all the way to the end, so I know that you're a real one. Thank you for being here. If you've read books from any of these countries and you enjoyed them, please leave them down below. So I have more books to check out when I finish my challenge and start lapping myself. If you've read any of these books specifically, please, please, please share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to talk about them more. And I'm gonna go stare at a wall for a while. Thank you again to Rosetta Stone for partnering with me on this video and for helping me to practice my French so that I actually could read F. de Décombres in like a day and a half. I truly believe that this would have been so much more difficult for me if I hadn't been practicing regularly with Rosetta Stone up to this point. So remember to click the link in my description box or scan the QR code on screen to get a special discount on a 12-month subscription from Rosetta Stone. You'll get access to all 25 languages, and if you dedicate yourself to practice, you'll be so impressed by how much progress you can make. Thank you again to Rosetta Stone for partnering with me on this video, and I'm going to go stare at a wall for a while. Thanks for being here. Bye, friends.